Ted Dabrowski, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. It's been a while since we had a chance to talk with you, and a number of things have happened since then. We had the end of session in the legislature. We just recently had the veto session. But as we come to you today, we just had in Virginia what is kind of a political earthquake in that a Republican won the governorship, the Republican won the lieutenant governorship, and the attorney general's race. And a lot of that had to do with, really a number of issues, but certainly with education and the teaching of critical race theory. And so we wanted to basically touch base with you as the president of Wirepoints and say, what, if anything, does this mean to the voters of Illinois and the political establishment in Illinois, which is also a blue state? So what are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is, it's pretty amazing some of the changes that happened in a place like Virginia where President Biden won by 10 points less than a year ago. And here we are, they have flipped that situation there. So it's pretty monumental, and you can see the reasons why. Obviously, parents were upset with, in particular, what was happening in their schools. And a lot of that has to do with big government thinking that they can control everything with a one-size-fits-all mandates. They're telling parents what to do. McAuliffe made a huge mistake by saying, teachers shouldn't be telling schools what they should teach. That's precisely the wrong argument. The argument is actually backwards. The school boards and all elected officials work for the public. The public are the taxpayers, and so we learned there that going too far, going too extreme on those kind of policies are going to make people speak up. That's certainly lesson number one. I think another big lesson is that a guy like Youngkin won on policy issues. He didn't attack McAuliffe as a person. He didn't put all his attacks on Biden as a person. He focused on policies, and people wanted to hear what policies he supported. On the other side, McAuliffe was all about Trump, and that doesn't work. And I think the lesson here for Illinois is people love to beat up on Madigan, they love to beat up on Pritzker. Republicans certainly do. What I would argue is that they should hit the failed policies of Madigan and Pritzker. That's what's wrong with Illinois. The people are people, but their policies are what need to be argued, and I think that's the way you win the arguments.
It's hard to say if I'm sure the politicians in Illinois watch the returns. I don't know to what extent they think they matter to Illinois or not. But I heard a comment today from someone who I thought was kind of interesting. He said the leading party is not the Republicans or the Democrats or the Independents, it's the parents' party, and that this was an issue in Virginia. There was also a rape of a woman, a student in Loudoun County. But basically that the average person isn't hyper-partisan, isn't hyper-political, but at a certain point, government, especially when it impacts parents' children, they awaken to the political realities and they get off the couch and they go out to their school boards and suddenly they realize the impact to their lives of what's going on, in this case in the schools, and then that led to the election of a Republican in Virginia. So I don't know if you've had any conversations with any of the politicians on the Democratic side of the aisle, let's say, or for that matter, let's just say in general. Have you had any sense to talk to them about CRT, critical race theory being taught, or any of the other issues? And to what extent do you sense that there is a growing angst in Illinois about how politics is being practiced?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is I don't think Illinois is at the same level as Virginia. We're still doing extreme, what I would argue are extreme progressive pushes on on virtually every policy front, right? The laws that are being passed are just that. They're often extreme, and that's you can go to the was it culturally responsive teaching and leading standards. That's CRT all the way. Critical race theory is driving a lot of parents upset with what's happening at their schools, and they're not getting much attention from the board members. The board members in Illinois are still full board on this stuff. So, but that said, I think there's more and more people upset in Illinois, not at the extreme of Virginia, but certainly going in that direction. And I think people are going to react. So I think we're still in that extreme movement. The pendulum is still swinging. In Virginia, the pendulum had swung as far as it was going to go, and now it's coming back. In Illinois, I think it's still swinging in the progressive way, and it's going to be a while before it changes politics and voting. So I think that's the sad part. But I think as long as and we'll talk about more other things that are going on, but as long as the extremities keep happening, you're eventually going to reach that point in Illinois where people push back. I'm pretty confident of that. It's just a matter of when and how long it takes.
Yeah, one of the things I sense, and it's just not just sensing, it's looking at the data, as they say, that two of the states that are losing population are California and Illinois. And so people here are fed up, and they're just saying, I'm not going to wait for the turnaround of Illinois. I'm just going to leave the state. And they're going to Indiana, Tennessee, Kentucky, Florida, Texas. And one of the reasons, as it was also a big reason in Virginia with the angst, was property taxes. And we had, Governor Rauner, a Republican, he said he wanted to do something about property taxes. Nothing got done. His primary nemesis was Mike Madigan, the longest-serving House Speaker in the history of America. Now Mike Madigan is gone. Do you sense with Chris Welch, the new House Speaker, any change? And we should say, for those who don't necessarily read Wirepoints consistently, that you are kind of focused a lot on, almost exclusively on, let's say, financial issues and issues of public policy issues having to do with
everything's become financial. Everything's become financial now, so it's kind of hard to get away from even cultural issues, right? Because they become very financial. COVID is financial. CRT is financial, where the money is being spent on not on math and reading, but instead on white supremacy and things like that. So it's taking away time from the classroom. So sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I think, and you kind of, to that point, I was going to say, first of all, to what extent do you cover anything culturally versus the financial issues? You've done a lot on things like property taxes, like the cost of education, like the cost of health care and all the rest. But as you say, there's always a financial component to all of these items. So that somewhat answers that. But is there any change in the political landscape in Illinois now that we are in a new era and Mike Madigan is no longer controlling the House?
No, we argued before that, and I can't remember if you and I talked about it, but Mike Madigan was probably a centrist in many ways, certainly fiscally, and I put that in quotes, centrist in Illinois, because he obviously proceeded over some of the biggest spending and the biggest deficits in the country. But that said, Chris Welch is a true progressive, and many of the things that they have passed under his leadership have made everything worse. They've made property taxes go higher. They've made pension debts go higher. If anything, they've used the billions of dollars that have come in from the federal government for COVID to expand all these programs. And so what's really interesting right now, and you ask about Wirepoints in our coverage of fiscal issues, well, think about this. The Chicago Public Schools is going to spend $6 billion more in 2022 than it did in 2019 before COVID came around. That's a 60% increase in their budget. $6 billion, 60%. They're going to use that on all kinds of programs, which will balloon spending, balloon pensions, balloon the problems, so the fiscal cliff will be bigger. Cook County, same thing, 40% more than they had pre-COVID. And it's all federal money that's just, quote, free money to spend. And the state government is also spending billions more. So and they're spending it all on cultural issues, and certainly equity has been at the center of virtually everything they talk about. Listen to Preckwinkle, listen to Lightfoot, listen to Pritzker. It's all about equity. It's no longer about merit. It's no longer about competence, but about equity. And so that means that the spending goes unstopped. And as long as they've got that free money, they're going to spend it and create bigger holes for Illinois. So that's what we've been covering. And so it's kind of all enmeshed: COVID, CRT, budgets, even sex ed teaching in the schools. It's it's one thing to have a view on something. It's another, which is what government is doing now, is making you pay for something you don't believe in. And that's where the rub comes for many people in Illinois and throughout the country.
One of the big things that we've covered over the years, and you've done a lot of work on, are the pensions. And as you just said, that's amazing to hear how the payments are going to the Chicago Public Schools have gone up a lot. Another area where we have increased a lot is in the area of pensions, and this is created by Wirepoints here, this slide, where it says, despite a quadrupling of taxpayer contributions since 2003, public safety pension debts have more than tripled to $13 billion. So when we talk about raising taxes, as we so often hear the governor and members of the legislature talk about, the reality is that even though we are, as taxpayers, dumping billions of dollars more into education, into the pensions, we're not getting ahead. We're continuing to fall behind. And maybe you can talk a bit about why that is, and to what extent does that determine that taxes are not the answer, that you're going to have to make some systemic change.
Yeah, we've written about that a lot, and papers across the country have picked that up. Wall Street Journal picked up our research that we did on these pension promises. They continue to grow faster, far faster than people's taxes can keep up with. So, even though Illinoisans keep putting in more and more and more money into pensions, and they're paying more through property taxes, we've had the income tax increases in 2011 and in 2017, and yet the holes are getting bigger and bigger. So it's kind of like you're putting more and more water into the bucket, and yet the bucket the level is actually going down. It's not even staying flat; it's going down. Things are getting worse, and this is why people are so upset. And I think it's worthwhile. We should spend some time and understand the race in New Jersey, where Chattarelli almost won, and a big part of that, I believe, is the property tax problem in New Jersey. New Jersey and Illinois compete back and forth for the top spot of the highest property taxes in the country, and they're fed up with it there. And people in Illinois have been fed up with it a long time, and I think rather than complain, people just keep leaving. And you're seeing that our property values in Illinois, they're up because of COVID, but they're still far below what everybody else's are. And when you adjust for inflation over the last 15, 20 years, our values are down. People are leaving. You've got these foreclosures and these zombie homes. People are just walking away. It's because the property taxes are so high, it's just not worth staying in your home. So people like in South Cook are walking away from homes. It's a huge number of homes that people stop paying their property taxes on. So that's unfortunately what people are left with. And Governor Pritzker, created that property tax commission, which never actually put out its recommendations. Governor Pritzker never followed up on lowering property taxes, and every bill, virtually every bill that I shouldn't say every bill, but there's many bills that Chris Welch and Governor Pritzker have put out that increase property taxes, and they just did that in this recent session.
And to the point that you just made about people walking away from their homes, I think that goes to show that how much more can you squeeze, how much tax dollars out of the taxpayers, where it's not just the homeowners, and they're suffering greatly, which is, again, why people are moving away from the state. But you have any number of other costs, and those property taxes also hit industry and trying to attract businesses to Illinois. It's very hard to attract new businesses to Illinois when they know that if they're going to have a plant, they're going to be paying probably a lot more than where they would be paying if they had that plant in Indiana or Tennessee or any number of other states. So it impacts the entire Illinois economy and is a drag on our ability to grow the economy. I'm sure that's true. And some years ago, I know when Caterpillar was expanding, the former CEO said we didn't even consider expanding in Illinois. And I think they went to South Carolina, if memory serves. And they
went to Georgia. They went to Georgia. Savannah, Georgia.
And it was because, I think in large part because of the property taxes, but also just some of the regulations that we have here, the regulatory burden that adds more costs. Do you see, talking about lessons from Virginia, at what point do we get some change here in the political awareness and I don't know, maybe it's an unfair question for you, but do you see any hope on the horizon for making changes that would make the cost of owning a home lower, the cost of running a business in Illinois lower?
Heck no. With the current crop of legislators, the current leadership, cost will only go up. We're doing some work on it. We'll be putting out a new pension report out soon, and the numbers that we'll be reporting on are phenomenal. And not, who cares about pension costs? Who cares about the numbers? They're billions and billions. Getting to be a portion of trillions pretty soon. What's important is the burden that falls on each household, because these pension debts have to be paid by somebody, and the law says, well, it's not going to be the current workers, state workers, or local government workers. It's not going to be the local or state retirees who draw a pension. It's going to be the taxpayers. It's going to be the homeowners. It's going to be the renters. It's going to be everybody, because the numbers are so big that the only way those pension debts can be paid down is just through massive tax increases. It's the only way. The amounts are bigger than I think Illinois can ever pay back, and so it's going to be huge punishment on people. And back to your point about people leaving, the choice for people will be, do I stay in Illinois and pay off these tens of thousands of taxes for pension debts that for work that's already done, not for new schools, not for better roads, not for better public health. It's all going to be for old stuff. And people will say, no, I'm out of here. And that means when they leave, the bill is left for the people who remain. And it's an ugly, vicious spiral that is a killer for Illinois. And right now, Pritzker continues to call pension reform a fantasy. People like Chris Welch will never talk about pension reform. Most Republicans won't talk about pension reform. Tim Butler, a Republican, agrees with Pritzker that pensions can't be reformed. The whole language is wrong. And by the way, none of it's true. Pensions are reformable even at the federal contract clause level. So until I think the problem gets deeper, until more people leave, until we get more embarrassment from the financial community nationally, and I guess internationally, nothing's going to happen till then, unless maybe these parents, as we talked about just a bit ago, unless these parents get so ticked off not only about their schools, but about their falling home values and about their rising property taxes and about all these mandates and controls that come from the state. Until that happens, local and state officials will continue to do what they've been doing, and that's just kind of milking the system for their benefit.
Let me bring up briefly here. This is a slide that you created, or a graphic you at Wirepoints created. And when we talk about the pensions, Mike Madigan once said 50%, this a couple of years ago, I don't know where it is now, 50% of the pension problem are teachers. And as Mike Madigan said at the time, they're not even state employees. But here we have in red, Illinois, according to your research, that Illinois' benefits are higher than any other state out there, and that we are not funding. I think the current payments, if I remember right, to that Illinois is paying into the pension system is $13 billion out of about a 40.
Yeah, it's
$1 or $2 billion state budget.
Correct.
But $13 billion, and we're still not catching up. And when you go back, I think we are, roughly 20% or 18% of our state budget is a pension payment. And when you go back to 2002, pension payments made up only 5% of the state budget. So it shows, as we said earlier, that we have quadrupled our payments to some of these different pensions, and we're still not catching up. So I don't know how the ruling class, they're not looking down the road, apparently. They seem to be every year just saying, let's put duct tape on the budget for one more year and cobble it together, but they're not addressing, that we're heading, to use a metaphor, we're in a canoe heading towards Niagara Falls, and no one is really doing anything to stop us from going over the cliff.
Well, I tell you why. I tell you what they think. They think there's going to be a federal bailout. Many of them are very happy to have received the billions of dollars from the COVID relief that came through. Never mind that in the end, Illinois and most of the governments in Illinois didn't need them because of the original CARES package and other support. But they've loved the billions, and now they think that, hey, this pension problem, we'll eventually get the federal government, to pay for it, because they'll never let Illinois go down. Uh, the question is, if the politics change right now, Biden and the control by Democrats of the House and the Senate, or virtual control of the Senate anyway, help them pass all these COVID packages. But if that changes in 2022 and 2024, bailouts will be gone. And as I mentioned, that fiscal cliff that's awaiting us once this federal money is spent in the next year and a half, the cliff's going to be huge, and it won't be. There won't be many can kicks left. And if there's no federal government to bail out specifically Illinois, who's got the biggest pension crisis in the nation, we are by far the biggest pension crisis. If the federal government doesn't bail it out, there's going to be big trouble. And I think the rating agencies will have to change their tune on Illinois after all this free money came in. Certainly people who were thinking about moving to Illinois will say, wait a minute, I don't want to move there and have tens of thousands of debt to pay for pensions that I never participated in. I didn't even live in Illinois.
Right. Talking about bailouts, when we look at the political reality on Capitol Hill right now, President Biden can't get his package through. The Democrats, the Republicans, I should say, from Tuesday's election picked up another seat in Ohio. So the Democrats don't have functionally a ruling majority. It's 50-50 in the Senate. Senator Manchin from West Virginia and Sinema from Arizona are not going to go along with these big spending bills. And most political observers think one of the lessons from Virginia is that it is a precursor to next year's election for Congress. So there's no, if the Republican, or if the politicians, I should say, in Illinois are looking for a federal bailout, as I look at the political landscape, they're not going to be getting it. And if the Republicans do take control of the House next year, they're certainly not going to be passing a massive bailout to bail out these blue states that were mismanaging their own pension systems.
Yeah, not to mention the amounts are so massive that Illinois is not, you can't bail it out. It needs to be reformed, and so you need to have pension reform, a constitutional amendment. We need to move from these defined contribution pension plans and move to 401k style plans. We got to do something about this compounded COLA that grows at 3% annually, unstopped. So there's a lot of things that need to be done. But I think the politics have to change at the federal level to bring the fiscal reality back to Illinois, because right now we're in la la land. I think we've written about this at Wirepoints. We've gone to the sites where they add up all the money, and $180 billion has come into Illinois for individuals through stimulus checks, for the state government, the local government, the school districts. $180 billion. So it's going through our system right now. It's why you see this crazy inflation. Partially, they're spending so much money that is creating inflation. You're seeing money being spent on all kinds of programs. In effect, I think all this COVID money is going to help fund Pritzker and Lightfoot's and Preckwinkle's re-election campaigns, because they're going to be spending money on programs and acting like it's their money and that they did such a good job, when in fact there's all federal money coming in.
Before we let you go, there's a couple of other things we could talk about, but let me throw it out to you. Or is there something particularly you want to make sure we talk about before we stop?
Well, I think we have to, at some point, and this is just for everybody to think about this, and probably take the lessons from Virginia, is that people want local control. And I think the number one thing that Illinois needs to change its path and to make to have Illinois have a chance of being a thriving state that's attractive to people, where we become a destination center again, like we used to be, a destination state like we used to be 60 years ago, is we got to decentralize power. The centralizing of power is killing the American way. And Springfield is stripping away power from our local school districts, our local governments. They've done it for a long time, and it's getting worse. It's becoming authoritarian in so many ways. They tell us what to do. Washington, D.C. is stripping away power from states in the same way. And so if there's anything we've learned from COVID, is that the bureaucrats, these political elite, they have no idea what they're doing. And that means we should push decision-making to the local level as much as possible. And if we don't do that, Illinois is going to be a wreck. Same thing at our national level. The other thing we need to do is bring back the individual to the center. If you're seeing a lot of these pushbacks in Virginia, it's all this identity politics. It's all about groups and races and affinity groups and all that. That's not the American way. The American way is the individual. The individual is at the core. The individual is beautiful. They have all these unique characteristics. You can build a great society when you have great individuals. And if we keep killing individuality, we're going to kill the value and self-worth. And so we need to really protect that. And another thing we need to do is bring back choice. These mandates coming down from the top, government's dictating what we do. You see that right now in the school districts and in health, mandating masks at school, mandating whether we're open or not, mandating what we learn, mandating CRT. It's too much. And the same thing in health, mandating vaccines. We need to give people the choices they deserve. And so until we do that in Illinois, people will keep fleeing. Last thing I'd probably add is that we got to think about deregulation. We have so much regulatory and how do you want to call it? We just have way too many controls coming from mandates, state mandates, unfunded mandates coming from the state on our businesses, on our governments. Until we change that, we'll never grow. And if we can't grow in Illinois, people will just continue to leave and find their places to thrive in other states like a Texas, like a Tennessee, like a Florida, where they're embracing growth and embracing entrepreneurship and embracing the individual. So those are the kind of things I think we need in Illinois if we're ever going to turn this place around.
And speaking of mandates, one of the things that the legislature did earlier this year was to pass a energy bill that will say that they want to be doing away with fossil fuels. Some people say this is virtue signaling. The governor is out saying that we are the most progressive state in terms of going green in the Midwest. And let's take a look here for a second that we have, and this is from 2018, so it's 3 years old, and this is the United States. Now, it's not exactly the same in Illinois because Illinois is the #1 state for nuclear power. About half of our power in Illinois, I think it's 53%, comes from nuclear. But when you look at this gives people at least an idea, when you look at the black there, oil, then you got the orange natural gas, and when you have, some of the other things here, what else are we? The bottom line is these alternative energy sources of wind and solar, and you see nationally wind is 2.5%, solar not even 1%, that trying to replace fossil fuels with so-called alternative energy, basically meaning wind and solar, it's just not possible. We would be back in the Stone Age. We would, and we see that happening. California's tried that, Germany's tried that, and yet, as we are just recently having the president come back from the summit in Glasgow, Scotland, on climate change, these ideas that we can do away with fossil fuels, plus people have noted, contrary to the president, it's natural gas. That is the reason that the United States is the #1 nation in the world to have cut our carbon emissions, because we went from coal, which is a dirtier fuel, and we went to natural gas. Both are reliable for creating energy. Both are keeping our energy bills low. Wind and solar are not what they call baseload energy. So I didn't know if you've had a chance to do any research on that and what the economic impact might be down the road if this law that the legislature has put into effect for Illinois to do away with our fossil fuels, what impact that might have on, again, the cost of living for people who are around back in the future here.
Yeah, we tried to research that when the bill was being passed in Illinois, and we actually FOIA'd the governor's office. We said, what is the plan? We wanted to see what kind of a plan that's in layman terms. How are you going to move from such a low share of green energy to such a high share of energy by 2030, by 2040, by 2050? We couldn't get one. They couldn't give us one. And that really concerns me, because if they don't have a clearly drawn out plan, and again, this is a long-term plan. I know I could be flexible in some sense, but they couldn't give us one. And that's because they don't have one. And the real problem is that you've got a real problem between Northern Illinois and Southern Illinois, and who's going to have that flexibility to make those changes, or if not, are we going to end up just cutting our own coal and supply and having to import energy from other states, dirty energy from other states? Is that what we did? just so we could virtue signal. It's not clear to me that we know how we're going to do this.
Yeah, and let me, if I might, Ted, let me insert this briefly. I found this is the Illinois energy pie here, and you see in yellow at the top there we got nuclear, so almost 53%, I think, is about where we are now. But you're going to do away under this energy bill they passed. You're going to do away with the magenta, which is coal, and you're going to be doing away with the blue, which is natural gas. So as we can see, the wind is the light green. That's 5.7, and the solar is virtually nothing. So
right, and we run the risk. We run the risk of our nuclear closing at some point, and there's a lot of people that don't like nuclear. So there's a big risk on that as well. That if that nuclear goes, then
how are you going to do away with 53% of your power? Speaking of Tim Butler, I spoke with him a couple of weeks ago, and he had on his phone a real-time app, an app that showed real-time where's our energy coming from in Springfield, and which is different than in some other parts of the state, notably up north. But as it showed on his phone, solar was 0%. Coming in at that moment. And why? Because it was nighttime. And, this is the obvious thing. When do you want the lights on? Obviously at night, and you have no solar. And people should know we have no methodology available technologically to store electrical power
Correct.
in mass quantities so that you can use it when the sun goes down. So
then we'll end up having to rely on coal as for base load from other parts of the system.
Well, as Representative Butler said, what are we going to do? We're going to buy power from a coal-fired plant outside of Illinois to bring in to keep the lights burning at night, and we're therefore accomplishing nothing in real terms as far as diminishing the use of fossil fuels. We're just going to be paying more money than we would have if it was our own coal-fired plant because we're buying it on the spot market from outside the state.
That's right. Yeah. Again, I think the biggest thing coming back to COVID and coming back to, if you look at, we actually just put out a piece about the Pritzker's push and the law that's likely to be signed, where the government is going to support the electrical vehicle industry with more incentives. And so here you go again. You've got Governor Pritzker and other political elites deciding which parts of industry, who are the winners and who are the losers. And I don't trust them to know who the right players are. I don't trust them to take taxpayer money, whether it be from people or higher property taxes for other manufacturers, that are then given away to some EV industry players to see if it works or not. It's not fair to the taxpayers of Illinois, and it's not fair to the companies that have to end up paying higher taxes to see if Governor Pritzker can pick some winner in the EV industry. It's just wrong. But again, this is what they're doing, and it's I think a perfect example of what's so wrong with Illinois. Not to mention that they want to make up for their mistakes of the last few decades. Illinois' manufacturing has collapsed far more than its neighbors, and since the Great Recession, all of our neighboring states have grown their manufacturing employment, their manufacturing base. Ours has still shrunk. So we have problems, and we're hiding from them by doing all these initiatives.
To make matters worse, and I'll just wrap up with this, to put this into perspective, not only is Illinois' financial situation continuing to get worse, but we have had for the last 11 years, or more, maybe about 12 years, the lowest interest rates in the history of the United States. And as we just heard yesterday from the Federal Reserve Chairman, the Federal Reserve is going to start to raise interest rates, which means the cost of doing business will go up. Your home values are probably going to go down because as interest rates go up and it becomes more expensive to buy a home, you're going to have to lower the price of the home. So if we didn't catch up when we had about a 12-year bull market, when we had the lowest interest rates in the history of the country, when are you ever going to catch up? We are going to have another recession at some point in the future. Hopefully it's a long way off. But no one within the legislature is making a serious effort to say, let's make hay while the sun is shining. Let's catch up on these bills. Let's make the adjustments. And I would just say, folks, if you're getting a pension and you're opposing any reforms, then good luck, because at some point, you're just going to wake up one day and the state might say, yeah, legally we owe you the money, but we're going to have to wait until there's money in the system to send you a check, because we are going to see the collapse at some point of these pension systems for fire and police and teachers and the rest, because they are, sustainable is a nice buzzword people like to use in politics. What is not sustainable is the current process of funding these pensions, where you just keep throwing more money into a bucket with a hole in the bottom.
Yeah, and just to correct one thing you said, Terry, we've had the really low rates, bull markets, massive bull markets. Not only did we fail to catch up, we got much, much worse. And that's the problem, is that, we didn't get any better. So I think maybe we end this discussion with the way we started, if I remember right. I can't remember if it's the last day of last year, the first day of this year, but we said there's no plan in Illinois. And what we know today is that there's still no plan in Illinois. The only thing right now, the plan is to spend the billions of dollars that came in from COVID. But there's no plan to fix this. There's no plan to bring down these property taxes, no plan to cut these pension costs, and no plan to keep Illinoisans here, because this is an amazing state with all its core resources. The politics and the policies are what the problem are, and until we fix that, people continue to flee.
I think you just said it. The politics and the policies, and this is not a partisan issue. It's math. Yeah. It's just math, and politics in America is supposed to be based on the people rule, and we are self-governing. But here we have a political class in Illinois that is just ignoring the fact that we are headed to financial disaster. And while we still have some time, even though the building's already on fire, while we have some time to address it, no one's addressing it. And they just, to the contrary, continue to ignore the problem as if it doesn't exist.
That's precisely true. That's the sad part. Let's see if we can get some change based on what's happening nationwide. I'm skeptical. I don't think so, not yet. But we'll keep pushing for it. And I think the first part is just transparency, understanding the problem. And at Wirepoints, we're trying to put out the solutions to help us. And so a big part of that is the pension plan that we put out there on our website, Pension Solutions. Go check that out. And
I was going to ask two last things. One, if people want to look at Wirepoints, how do they find it?
Yeah, go to wirepoints.org. Yeah, we have our website there. We aggregate news from both sides of the aisle. The news that we think is important for you to know, and we put that in an email every day. So if you want to sign up for our daily newsletter, it's there. And then, of course, on Facebook and on Twitter, Instagram, at Wirepoints. And within our website, we have, as I mentioned, our pension solutions, and we're going to be putting up pension data pretty soon. So, we hope to just keep educating people and provide some ideas.
And one last thing I should have asked earlier. As we look at the current crop of Republicans running for governor, are there any solutions? Do you think the Republican side is addressing the issues, or would you say so far they're not?
No, not yet. Everybody's still doing their grassroots thing. They've made some comments. We've seen a few good things said, but for the most part, it's too early. It's too early to say whether any of them have any gumption to take on the problems, or will they just try to run a kind of a soft campaign. I think this is a great time for really taking on the issues. I think Illinoisans are hungry for hearing that nobody speaks the truth in Illinois, and that's been the hard part for decades. So will one of these guys speak up, be strong, take on the issues, or will they shy away from things like pensions and property taxes and just speak in big terms and soft terms? We have to wait and see. I don't have a view yet.
Well, as always, thanks for your research, and we appreciate what you do at Wirepoints. We'll let you go. Kept you longer than we should have, but we'll look forward to talking to you again in the future.
I appreciate it, Terry.
Thanks so much. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.